Hi, this is Brennan Davis from Bedrock Games and the Bedrock blog, and I'm here with Kenny, and we're talking about Return of Condor Heroes, chapters 16 through 20. This is the second half of the second volume of Return of Condor Heroes. We're trying to do 5 chapters at a time, and today we're covering chapters 16 through 20, and those deal with the end of the big duel with Lee Mochu from the last episode we did, and cover a lot of ground, but the bulk of the story here really takes place in an area called Passionless Valley, where Zhao Long Nu is forced to marry this villainous master, and Yangor arrives with a posse of men that include Jinlun, the bad guy that he was dealing with in the earlier chapters, and a number of mercenaries that the Mongols have hired. And in this portion of the book, Yangor is determined to kill Guo Jing because he believes that he is somehow responsible for his father's death, and so that's why he's joined up with these Mongols. And so there's all of this stuff that happens at Passionless Valley, which we'll go over, and then from there, the action shifts to a city that's under siege as the Mongols are advancing south, and Yangor has to decide if he's actually going to kill Guo Jing, who is heroically defending the city from their advances. So I guess we'll start with chapter 16. Does that sound reasonable here?
Yeah.
So in this chapter, we kind of get the end of that battle. Li Mochu and Feng Mo Feng are beginning to fight. And I thought this was a really cool visual sort of martial arts display where you had Feng Mo Feng, who's got I think he's fighting with a crutch and he's fighting with a hammer, but they're both bright red from the forge, and he ends up there's a couple of interesting things about this one. Number one, he says in the battle he's never actually fought a person before. So, I mean, I'm presuming that he's had some sparring training and things like that, but he's never been in a life and death match. And he ends up burning Li Mochu's gown and burning her fly whisk. And so she's sort of left embarrassed as her arms and legs are exposed. And Yangor gives her his robe, which is the robe that I think what's her name, Yang Qing,
Chen Ying
made for him, and she ends up fleeing, and then and then this is sort of when the Mongols begin advancing south, and they go their separate ways from Feng Mo Feng. So I don't know, just dealing with that battle before we get into the rest of it. What'd you think of the battle, and did you have any thoughts on that?
I thought it was a very well written battle because they've got Feng Wufeng, who is a cripple because his master Huang Yaoshi crippled all of his disciples after his 2 leading disciples stole the Nanyin manual, right? And this was the only disciple who was left with one leg uncrippled. So all the other disciples had both the legs crippled, and this was the only one who was left with one leg. So he could still fight. Like he still had. So one part of the description says that he uses the golden rooster standing stance because he only has the one good leg to fight with.
Yep, and it's like his feet are planted in the ground, right? He's it's like a very striking. It's like one of those ones I picture like in the movies when the guy's like sort of like you get like the camera pans down and the wind is catching the guy and he's like rising up into the sky. I sort of picture it as one of those kind of stances.
I was thinking it was like the Karate Kid in the first one when he was doing the kick thing. Like, he had one leg.
It's funny though, but that's one of the great things about reading the books rather than seeing them on the screen is because sometimes you'll just get a name and you'll get like a colorful description, and you could really imagine it a number of different ways. So I think that's one of the cool things about dealing with the books, and I might even be injecting some image from a series that's in the back of my head here, but yeah. So I'm sorry. Go on.
And yeah, like and then the fact that he hasn't had any combat experience is also like a nice little aspect there, and takes a lot of goading from Yang Guo, saying that Imo Chara slandered his master, but before he's actually like angry enough to start actually attacking instead of like being on the defensive or whatever. And and there's another aspect here of showing that not all martial arts are created equal. You have martial arts that can counter martial arts, or weapons that can counter styles and stuff quite well, because Levo shows fly whisk is obviously made of like a fibrous material or fabric or whatever. It's probably like horsehair or whatever. And yeah, because it's wrapped around something hot, it just melts and sizzles away, leaving a weaponness, which is I think that's a pretty cool tidbit from the fight there. It's just and the fact that he stuck both his crutch and the hammer into the forge, and had what I think the industry calls asbestos hands, right? Because they can hold really hot things without feeling the pain. And he's been a blacksmith, for ever since he got exiled from the Peach Blossom Island. So it was a nice little thing to show, this is what he's been doing all this time. Now his hands can handle these hot weapons, and even though he doesn't really know how to fight to kill, his skill was so sufficient, and his choice of and his method that he's using to combat the Imocho just perfectly countered hers.
Yeah, no, and I think it's interesting too that he spent all that time making that the scissors, and then it turns out the scissors weren't even necessary, because his the heat from his crutch and hammer just melted the hairs from her fly whisk. Another aspect of this too that's kind of important is Yango is able to give her the robe that she gave to him, because he still has the robe that Zhao Longnu made for him underneath, even though it's a little bit tattered at this point, I think.
I was just thinking, wasn't he hot? Like, he's wearing a robe that was obviously designed to, last in the cold, the cold tomb, right? The cold ancient tomb, and then now he's wearing another robe on top that was given to him by Cheng Ying, and
probably is a little bit hot, I would imagine, especially in the middle of this kind of fighting.
Yeah.
I mean, they never really get into that sort of. I mean, these people must really be sweaty after.
And the smell would be pretty.
Yeah. But then we get the sense that the Mongols are coming, and Yango sort of ponders at this point, like, the Mongolian army is vast, and I am just one person. What use would I be? So he's sort of abandoning any idea of doing anything about the Mongols. And as he's traveling with Shagu and Lu Shuang and again, I don't want to reverse her name again. Chen Ying, right? Shagu still has the 5 poison palm effect, and so she's kind of delirious, and she mistakes Yango for his father again. And this time he gets a lot more information out of her by threatening to strangle her, and kind of getting a little bit scary. And eventually he works out that it's
he thinks he worked out.
Yeah, he thinks he's well, because it's not totally clear. Like, he kind of has to do a process of elimination with her, and he sort of is like, okay, she doesn't remember who the attacker is, but he kind of figures out who this person calls. Like, okay, what does she call your grandpa? Oh, she calls him father. Okay, it must be Huang Rong. And so he just kind of narrows it down, and this is where I think the story gets, number one, it gets really interesting. It gets really dark too, because Yango he fully commits to this idea of killing Guo Jing once he decides on it. At least it seems he does early on, and he departs from the 2 sisters, or the cousins, and he
does his usual thing of running off into the sunset and like lamenting in the world again, basically.
And he rides off on a horse, and he ends up bumping into De Urba, of all people, who's trying to I think he's trying to get some fruit out of a tree, and he's not really having a lot of success. But then he finds Jin Lun recovering from his injuries, and he could kill him, but instead he decides to heal him and team up with him. and tells him that he wants his help killing Guo Jing. And so from there, Jin Lun takes him to the camp of Kublai. I don't think he's a Khan yet. Is he a Khan at this point?
Probably not.
But he takes him to Kublai's tent, and he's grandson of Genghis Khan, and he's been assigned the task of attacking, what's the city? Xiangyang.
Shangyang, yeah.
Xiangyang. So he's been assigned the task of attacking this city which Guo Jing is defending, and so he's assembled a group of mercenaries that are sort of this group of really strange characters. One guy's got a face like a zombie. Another guy's like 8 feet tall. Another guy's really short and from India. Another one of the guys is Hu from northwestern China, and so there's this whole sort of event that occurs inside Kublai's tent where they're fighting over this piece of beef that Jin Lun is sort of using to represent his title as first protector of Mongolia. And
yeah, because I think we should mention that the Kublai was sort of honoring Jin Lun as because none of these people had met before, and like he introduces Jin Lun as the first protector of Mongolia and the strongest warrior type thing, bigging him up, and the other people were just like, no, he doesn't look that great. I'm probably a better fighter than him. And there's a lot also little discussions about like the origin of martial arts from like Indian martial arts, slowly filtered into Tibet, and Jin Lun is a Tibetan monk, so obviously his kung fu can't exceed the original, the predecessors, right?
And one of the things I love about this, it almost reminds me, I don't know if you probably have seen it, but the original Blackadder series where they assemble the team of like the most villainous people in the land, and they just end up kind of bickering and fighting, and then they end up betraying him. This group always reminds me of those guys because they're just so they're all very distinct and I don't know, just they all have egos, so they're all and it just constantly seems to lead to bickering and working at cross purposes. But anyways, yeah. So in this situation, he sort of holds up the slab of beef, and everybody's trying to take it from him, and they can't. And then Zhu Batong shows up, and it's kind of an unexpected, very interesting moment where they hear somebody calling for Brother Jing outside, and Zhu Batong runs into the tent and basically makes a mess of things. One of Kublai's...
It's a bit slapstick, I think, as well.
Yeah, it's really slapstick. I think at one point, one of Kublai's advisors or one of his men tries to poison Zhu Batong, and Zhu Batong grabs the wine and drinks it, and Yango is thinking, oh no, this guy's too innocent, he's going to be poisoned to death, and then Zhu Batong sits there and just basically tries to go to the bathroom, right, and like takes, he says he has to take a crap, and he sort of is, sitting there trying to go to the bathroom, and he can't, and he says, I haven't drunken enough poison, and so he drinks 3 more cups, and it's just on and on like this, and then he reveals that he was searching the Mongolian camp because he knew that Guo Jing liked to hang out with Mongols, and he had received
very outdated news.
Yeah, it's very old news, and he's missed this gathering of heroes that he was invited to, and then these people in green show up and throw a net around him and say that he had caused all kind of problems in their master's estate, and they take him away. And then the group of men, the group of mercenaries, Jin Lun and Yanguo, all sort of chase after them. And I think that is that still in this chapter, or have we arrived at the end of chapter 6 by that point?
No, because they have to follow the Green Road people first, and then they actually stay the night in the hut.
Oh,
where they were only served like vegetables and water, and one of the 8 foot tall guy,
Guangzhou, I think.
Yeah, he was really angry because it's like, oh, this is no way to treat a guest, and where's the meat and the wine and all that stuff, and we learned a little bit about the background of these people. I don't think it's mentioned explicitly that they are from the Passionless Valley at this point.
Yeah, I think it's the
Um,
next chapter where we
yeah,
get.
but you get a little bit of like foreshadowing saying that we're not allowed to eat meat and drink water and we only ever drink water because that's our way type of
Yep.
thing.
Yep. No,
Yeah.
that's and then in the next chapter, which is chapter 17, the secluded passionless valley, that's when we get sort of the full introduction of the place. And Yangoa, it seems like he's kind of wandering around the valley, and he sees cranes, herd of white deer, rabbits, all this grass and wonderful flowers. But he discovers that the flowers have this special property that if you prick yourself on their thorns, that you get poisoned. And if you think about love within the next 24 hours, you feel excruciating pain. And he also finds out that the fruit of the flowers has unusual properties as well. That they can taste sweet, sour. They can taste stinky or hot, or all kinds of things, and you never know until you eat them. So all the things here are sort of like a sort of metaphor for love, and and you look like did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I was just saying, the petals are the flower itself is an allegory for love there, and it's just like how, well, no, because I think what happened was that he eats a petal at the urging of I think she's introduced herself, Gong Sun Lua, who introduces herself as the daughter of the master of the Passionless Valley. Like tells him to eat a petal from the flower. And at first he thought it was really sweet, but then the petal's flavor changed to bitterness,
Yeah.
leaving a bitter aftertaste. Right, so it's just like, oh, it's supposed to be a representation of how love starts off all sweet, and then undoubtedly something tragic happens or whatever. Love fades away, and you're just left with bitterness.
Yeah, and the girl is Lua, the daughter of the master of Passionless Valley. We don't know that yet, but that's who she is. And
I think she introduces herself fairly shortly afterwards because she starts fancying Yanguo at this point.
yeah, they have a whole conversation. He kind of, but she's a little bit playful about it. Like she only gives her surname first, and then she gives her personal name, and then I think Yangor is a little bit troubled by the fact that he's flirting with her. He's starting to think of Xiao Long Nu, and
Yeah.
but then he starts feeling some passions for this girl, and he experiences pain, and he says that she's the cause of the pain that he's feeling, and she kind of runs away. But she clearly is developing a fondness for him, and this is another moment, by the way, where we get one of those things where he very specifically describes the level of beauty of the character. So, he sort of mentions that she's slightly inferior in beauty to Cheng Yin and Lu Wushuang, and then describes her as elegant, graceful, and wholesome. So it's
It's
it's just
a weird description of beauty. You're a wholesome beauty, so that's probably a 7, a 6.
well, I think so here's what I think he meant by wholesome. I think he meant that she just seems kind of generally nice and kind, and
Yeah,
not and again, she comes from this place where they don't eat meat or drink wine, so she's probably fairly, lives a
a
fairly
good
tame life.
complexion, no,
Yeah.
no acne type of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, so then they end up eventually being introduced to this master finally, and they're also introduced to his senior disciple Fan Yi Wang, who's this short guy with a really really long beard,
Yeah,
and and um and something really weird happens. There's a whole series of things that happen. They find out, number one, that this valley is secluded, and that this guy's ancestors have lived here since the Tang Dynasty when they were court officials, and the zombie face guy, what's his name, Zhao Zhangji, I think.
yeah, Shao Shanji. Yeah.
Okay, Xiao Shanxi. He starts kind of prodding the Valley Master, And when the Valley Master mentions his ancestors, he he asks if they ever heard of concubine Yang, and then he accuses them of drinking the water that concubine Yang washed her feet in. And she's like a very famous person from history who is partly responsible for the the Anlushan rebellion through her I think her cousin Yang Gushang. So it's a very big insult on numerous levels, and it soon becomes clear that this isn't Zhao Zhangxi. This is Zhu Batong disguised as Zhao Zhangxi, and he starts fighting with Fan Yiwang, and if you want to jump in, certainly jump in because I don't want to.
Yeah, because I'd say like what an important thing here is that Yang Guo discovers that Zhao Botong actually stole his human skin mask or whatever it was called. A really ugly mask that Cheng Ying had given to Yang Guo to use, as well as his scissors, which Fan Fan had forged at the beginning of the of chapter 16 or so, I think. It's important because we discover at the same somewhere down the line that that Zhao Botong had actually planted something on Yang Guo as well at this point, I think, which he doesn't discover. And it shows like, what the level of mastery that Zhao Botong is at here. So he can like effortlessly steal the mask and the scissors from Yang Guo without him realizing.
Well, and not just that, but all this stuff is planned from for he it seems like he's just being a ridiculous person, but everything he's doing actually is part of a plan that he seems to have and is making some amount of sense. But we get this great battle between him and Fan Yiwang, and I think he's wielding the scissors, and Fan Yiwang is wielding the staff, and he's trying to cut
a 10-foot long staff, wasn't it as well?
So
it was like something
it's
ridiculous.
220 pounds. It's like a bunch of guys have to carry it into the chamber to bring it to him.
Yeah.
And Fan Yuang is really, really short, so it's even more spectacular. And so
11-foot long steel dragon head staff.
and so then when it's revealed that it's Zhu Batong, all of the Jie Valley people try to capture him in a net again, and there's this whole exchange between Zhu Batong and the Jie Valley Master, where Zhu Batong, is where the Master basically says, "Give me all the stuff that you stole. I'll let you go. It's my wedding day. I don't want any disruptions." And Zhu Batong says, "That's crap," and he just takes off all his clothes, and he says, "I'm as pure as the day I was born," and then they end up trying to capture him, but they just end up grabbing Ma Guanju and one of the other guys in the net, and again it's this series of sort of slapstick things, but what we find out is that the reason why Zhu Batong is so upset at the Valley Master is that he's this old guy and he's marrying this young beautiful woman who we discover is Zhao Longnu, and Yang Guo sees her arrive and sit down next to his name is Gongsun Shi, the Master of Passionless Valley. I don't know at what point this is discovered, but she sits down next to him and she ignores Yang Guo and pretends like she doesn't know him. And this leads to a great deal of distress on Yang Guo's part, and eventually things sort out, and she acknowledges Yang Guo, and
but only at the sort of cost of death, right? Like she basically Gongsun Ji sort of calls out people when they have like these nets with weapons on them and stuff, right? And I think like Gongsun Ji realizes that Xiaolongnu is, or I don't remember what name she was using, but
Miss Lu,
it was,
Miss Lao.
Yeah, and Liu something or other, and it was paired with Yang Guo's name, and Gong Xingji was getting jealous that that this young handsome guy is coming on his wedding day and flirting with his fiance type thing, and he sort of pulls out the stops to try and uh, or just sort Yang Guo out and capture him and throw him, and make him leave the valley, basically, right?
Yeah, and this is the point. This actually gets us into the next chapter, which is chapter 18, Valley Master Gong Sun, and this is where, because of the name that she chose, that pairs with Yang Gordon, I think mean willow tree or something. He takes a willow branch and starts fighting with Fan Yi Wang, who's been ordered to kill him, and uses the coil theory of dog beating stick, I think, which is sort of, I guess the idea is he's fighting this guy that's got this giant staff, so he is trying to use the staff's power against itself.
I think it's a sort of a Tai Chi thing of like adding just a bit of force to completely divert the attack out of the way rather than meeting it head on and clashing.
I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
Because they mentioned the principle of using 4 tails to move 1,000 jin or whatever. Which is a common phrase in wuxia novels and xianxia novels, isn't it? It's the concept of using a light force to move a heavy one.
And they use another phrase too, using current to move boat. But same thing. And yeah, so there's a bunch of stuff that happens, but ultimately what it leads to is Yang Guo and Xiaolong Nu both end up fighting the master, and they have to go into this special sword room that he has and select some blades. And number one, the sword room is trapped, so the Valley Master is a pretty, right off the bat he's pretty despicable, and he doesn't even really care if Xiaolong Nu is alive when he marries her. He just wants to marry her almost out of spite at this point. He's so jealous
because I think he already knows knows that, like, even if she marries him, but if he killed Yang Guo, then she won't truly belong to him anyway, and it was getting all hung up about how no matter what, she's not going to be mine anyway, so I may as well just get rid of them together, type of thing.
And so they go to this sword room, and a couple of things happen here. Number one, they find these 2 black swords. One of them is called Gentleman, one of them is called Lady. And they find them because there's a painting that was burned by Zhu Batong. So again, like, Zhu Batong has had all this foresight to do all these things that need to be done in order for them to sort of.
I don't think that was intentional. I think he was just making trouble, and it just coincidentally revealed where these precious swords were hidden.
But like everything else he did leads to something. So I feel like that too might have been an act of foresight.
I mean, this would require him knowing that Miss Liu was Xiaolong Nu, and that Yang Guo, because this is all before. Because even back when Yang Guo was in the Mongolian camp drinking, and they were fighting over the beef and stuff, Zhou Botong barges in, and then promptly after is captured by the Passionless Valley disciples. So I wouldn't say that it was all planned out. It was just all worked out. Okay. And as a result of Zhou Botong's actions, because otherwise you can't really explain why he ran. He caused trouble at the Passionless Valley, stole the items, burnt all the paintings in order to lure Yang Guo there and cause trouble.
I will point out everything he does leads to the reunion of Yang Guo and Xiaolong Nu. It all sort of works out in the end. So I don't know, but it's interesting. So. But either way, whether intentional or not, he burns this painting, and there's these swords there, which they take. But the other thing that happens is Xiaolong Nu pricks her finger on one of these passion flower thorns that's in a vase in the sword room, and so now when they go to fight the Valley Master, their sword play is predicated on their feelings of passion for each other, and so it creates all kinds of problems during the battle for them.
Yeah, because the principle behind the Jade Maiden swordplay and the Transcend swordplay sort of is supposed to cover for each other. You're supposed to forego defense for yourself in favor of sort of covering for your lover's deficiencies, and if both parties do it at the same time, then that's when it's supposed to be the most powerful. And the only way to get to that stage is to be young and in love, which obviously works against them in this case because of the poison from the passion flower.
Exactly, and a couple of things that happen here also are the Valley Master we learn he has this special technique where his pressure points are blocked off, so they can't really do any. They can't like attack his pressure points, and he uses these really cool weapons. He's got a one golden blade, was one golden saber and a black flexible blade, and it's he cuts a pretty cool image. He's got the way he's described too is pretty. He's a pretty striking character, but eventually what ends up happening is Yango is captured. And he throws him into a patch of, or he might just throw a bunch of thorns on him. I can't remember if he gets thrown in a patch.
He throws him into a patch of passion flowers, and then Gongxin uses that to threaten Xiaolongliu into marrying him, saying, "I have the antidote for the flowers." Like if it was just a standard prick, then he would be fine. But if because he's taking on so much of this poison, he will die if I don't give him the antidote. If you marry me, I will give him the antidote and kick him out from the valley, and trying to blackmail her basically. And
then Xiaolongliu jumps in on top of him and gets hit with the thorns as well, and the master just decides to go ahead with the wedding. And
he's got a one-track mind. He's like, I'm going to marry a young, beautiful woman, and nothing's going to stop me.
By the way, I'm hearing a little bit of something in the background there, but if you can't do anything about it, don't worry. But the thing that I love about this guy is he goes from being sort of kind of like a reasonable seeming like it seems like he can be reasoned with, and that he rescued Xiaolongliu when she was injured and healed her, and maybe he's not such a bad guy, to just becoming so over the top villainous. He's acting like Dracula by the end of these chapters. And so what ends up happening is Lua comes in and rescues Yango, and she helps him escape, and then she goes to her father's medicine room and tries to get him the pill to cure the poison, and she doesn't come back. So Yango goes there, and he sees her about to be punished by her father, and the father senses Yango, so he acts like he's going to execute her. And then as Yango runs in to protect her, the father, and this is where he really starts getting villainous, throws his daughter at Yango and opens a trap door, and they fall into this pit below the room, and it's like it's like a watery pit filled with crocodiles, and then that's what leads us to the next chapter. But I don't know if, there's a lot happened here, so I don't know if you had any thoughts on some of these details.
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole rescuing Xiaolongliu part from Gongxin, I think it was a selfish maneuver from him anyway. He probably saw how beautiful she was and was like, I rescue her and like maybe she'll be grateful and then marry me. And yeah, we don't really have much for on the motivation of Gongxin here, but just because all we know that is he wants to marry her, and no real reason why. Like, it's not like he's inviting all the martial heroes of the world and like showing off that even in his old age he can marry a young beauty type thing. And it was going to have a quiet ceremony. It was only because the Mongolian warriors and Yanguo barged in that he's having guests, right? So I don't know what his end game here is. At this point, we can't really tell. Basically, I'd say.
No, I would agree, and I think when we learn more about his backstory, I think it sheds light on why he wants to marry this young woman, and it's related to something that happened to him. But so here we have sort of the whole underground adventure with Lua and Yango, and I think they make an interesting pair in this chapter. They get attacked by crocodiles, and Yango kicks them and ends up killing one. And then he finds out that he's got all this stuff in his pockets, which you had mentioned. He's got like a pill that's square shaped. He's got a dagger. He's got sheepskin that's got a map of the manor on it, and he's got some spirit fungus. And so they eat the spirit fungus, and then they start following the map to try to figure out a way to get out. And they end up.
Coincidentally, also the dagger has like a pearl on it or something, which lights up, right? Is that then they were using that to sort of look at the map?
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right about that. And and again, like all these things that Zubetong had done sort of fell into place very neatly for them, and they stumble into a chamber where they hear this laughter, and it turns out to be the voice of Lua's mother, who we find out was thrown into this pit by the master of Passionless Valley after he had cut her tendons and left her for dead, basically.
Basically crippled her and chucked her in there. And she only survived because some date seeds had apparently fallen in and like sprouted into trees, and she basically spent like, I don't know, like, were we given a time frame of how long she was down there?
She was there since Lua was 6. So,
or maybe 10 years is probably a good amount. Like, she spent basically 10 years down in the dark and with a bare minimum of like some very small spots of sunshine coming through, which landing on these date trees that basically is all she's subsisting on.
And up to this point, Lua thought her mom died. She was told that her mother had died when she was young, and anytime she asked her father about it, he got angry. And so she's excited to be reunited with her mother, but she's this really nice girl who's got the most awful parents in the world. And just one thing that I thought was kind of interesting here is that, you have this, it's almost, you have this horrible father who has this nice daughter, and Lua is kind of similar to what Yangoa might be if his father had lived. Do you know what I mean? Like, she's, good person, born from a bad person. And I don't know if that's intentional or not, but I thought it's an interesting parallel.
That is an interesting parallel. I didn't realize that, but but then again, like, the mother in this case isn't a very nice person either way. But I think.
But she thought her mother died when she was young, and Yango's mother died when he was young. So that's But that does throw a wrench in the theory, because she is one of the most despicable people you'll ever encounter. This mother. I mean, what's funny is how like the mother and father just keep getting more and more despicable as the chapters go on. It's almost amazing. But we learn a lot here. Number one, we learn that that the mother is the one who taught Gongsun Shi a lot of his martial arts, and that she helped improve his swordplay, and that she is the sister of the Iron Palm clan chief. So she's the sister of Qian Ren, Iron Palm skimming on water, who's from the he's a character in this book as well, but he's a very important character in the original book, and so. She's sort of tied into this much broader martial world. She met Gongsun, and she married him, but he ended up having an affair with one of his maids. I think her name was Ru'er. Is that correct?
Yeah, Ru'er.
Because basically, so the mother's name is Qianqi, and she had fled from Iron Palm Peak when her brothers were having a fight over one of them impersonating the other. And she married Gongsun, and Gongsun had an affair with this maid, and she overhears them planning to flee, and so she throws the maid in a flower patch, much like what happened to Yangoa, and then she does the same thing to Gongsun, and when he rushes to go get the pills to cure the poison, he finds hundreds of pills soaked in arsenic. And she tells him there's only one pill left. And she puts it down and she says, you have to decide, are you going to live or is she going to live? And so he tells, we'll meet in the, like we'll both die today and meet in the next life. He kills Ru'er, and then he basically says, okay, I'll do what you want. And he turns out, and it's funny because she's floored by this. She wasn't expecting him to do this at all. And he starts playing nice, but then he poisons her wine and
throws her in the pit.
Throws her in the pit. Also, she tells him that there's another pill. There were actually two pills. That was sort of she was just sort of creating the impression of one pill before to sort of cause some misery, and force him to choose. But yeah, and then he throws her in the pit, and
I think is it revealed here that it's not just one pill that she had as well? I think she had two pills, right?
Yeah, she says she had two pills.
Shinji doesn't actually have any. No, Shinji had one pill, found one pill, and he didn't find the other one when he chucked her into the pit as well. So the pill that Yanguo currently has, the square pill that's on part of them, is one of the pills, and the other one is still on Chen-Chi's.
Yes, yeah, and that's important down the road because there's only two pills left, and he's only got a certain amount of days before he dies.
And also this is also part of the scheme of Gongxinzi here. So Gongxinzi was promising Xiaolong Nu that he would cure Yanguo's poison, but he himself doesn't even have a pill to cure Xiaolong Nu. So what is he trying to do? He's got a wife that's going to die in 36 days or whatever.
Well, maybe he's just really optimistic that he's going to get that pill back from Zhu Batong. But yeah, he definitely, at the moment, he does not have a pill to give.
He's making all these promises for no reason.
But again, he's made clear he doesn't care if she's alive or dead. He's willing to kill her and then marry her. He really doesn't care. He's a brutal guy. But anyways, they find out that the mother has been developed this amazing kung fu where, because her tendons are cut, she's mastered spitting these date stones out of her mouth. And so, but otherwise she's fairly useless. She can't really do a whole lot except for spit these seeds. And so she isn't able to get out of the pit. But Yanguo finds out there's like 1,000-foot tunnel leading up, and it's got a rough wall. And so he climbs up. He uses the dagger to cut a bunch of bark off the date trees and make a rope and throw it down. And he starts bringing them up.
I don't think it was 1,000 feet. That's a bit ridiculous.
It was really high. I forget how.
Yeah, it was high. I think even 100 feet up is pretty high. 1,000 feet is.
I think it was I thought they said 700 something feet at one point, but I could be wrong. we'll look it up. We'll look it up after. I could be totally wrong. And in my notes I wrote 1,000 feet, but there could have been any number of reasons.
That sounds too ridiculous, though. Like 1,000 feet is basically a very
That's really high.
Yeah. 100 feet makes more sense. Like 100 feet is still pretty high up for a human to try and jump out of.
That's true. But we'll look it up. I'm not sure what the exact numbers are. But he gets the mother up. But then as he's taking Lure up, he gets attacked by Fan Yinwang again, and he starts dropping her. She and him eventually tumble in, and then the mom saves them by threatening one of Fan Yuwang's acupoints. And
it's important to note, and the only reason she could threaten him is because she basically taught Gongxinzi all his kung fu, and knows exactly where all the weak points of their style is.
Yeah, because she mentions that I'm gonna destroy your spirit stage acupoint or something, and that resonates with him. He's like, oh, she definitely knows what's going to affect me here. And so they escape. She instructs Yanguo to kill Fan Yiwang, and so he says, "Okay, you guys go ahead. I'll take care of him." And he just paralyzes him, and then whispers in his ear that he doesn't have any grudges against him. And
so this also shows, I think, highlights a little bit about Yanguo as well, that he isn't a person who kills without reason. Like he is a merciful person, as it were. Like Fan Yiwang has done nothing but try to kill him basically since they've met, and he's still like, well, that's fine.
And I think that's important because we are dealing with Yanguo during his dark period where he could be at his most evil potentially, and he still
go down his father's route as it were.
And so they decide to crash this wedding, of course. And she comes up with this plan of pretending to be she being the mother, Qianxi. She decides to pretend to be her brother, Chan Ren. And so she goes there and she basically, uses her exceptional, I don't know, lung kung fu to sort of bellow and say, what about the wedding of old, and and then there's some question among the guests whether she's actually Chan Ren or not. And I should say she uses the mask that Yango had to disguise herself. This mask is coming in really handy during this.
And that's apparently taking the appearance of anyone, like anybody.
I think it just looks gross and ugly. So I think as long as they don't recognize that it's her, was all she was concerned. But I don't know. It is pretty.
I'm thinking maybe it's like a weird sort of plasticine model type thing where you can like shape it with enough, like if you use your chi and you can sort of form the face you want to see. Maybe
it's definitely getting a lot of mileage. I think we could definitely say that. But anyways, a lot of stuff happens. But the master of I keep wanting to say Jay Valley, Passionless Valley, says he basically says, "Look, I have a letter from your brother," and so he doesn't say from your brother, but he says, "I have a letter from Qian Ren." And he reads the letter, and the letter says, "Ever since first brother died at the hands of Guo Jing on Iron Palm Peak," and then it goes on to say that Qian Ren desires to atone for his sins because he did a lot of bad stuff, and then it's signed Monk Chien, I think is his name, and so he's adopted a new name, like a religious name, and so this does a couple of things. Number one. It throws her off because she finds out that one of her brothers is dead and she didn't realize that. And number two, it plants this. She knows who killed her brother and who to go to get revenge against, which will become important in the next chapter. But there's a whole thing, and this gets us into the next chapter basically, which is chapter 20, Heroes Imperative, where the husband and wife start fighting each other, and I think he slams her against a pillar and she bangs her head, and Zhao Longnu treats the wound, and then Yangor begins fighting with Master Gongsun. And I believe there are there any more reveals during this fight, or is everything sort of come to light?
The very important one is Yang basically manages to hold off Gong Xinzi for a long while. Thanks to the help of Chen Qi sort of calling out moves and explaining theories as they're fighting. At some point, they're like, "Oh, everyone should take a break first." This is like, and I think that's sort of the next part is where she secretly takes some of the blood that from the wound caused from her being slammed in the pillar and dips it into the tea and serves it to both Yang Guo and Gong Xinzi.
Go ahead.
Okay.
I was gonna say this is one of those classic scenes. This is like a really great moment in the story where you're kind of like, what's going on with that? Why is she putting blood in the tea? And then but go on.
Yeah, and basically, Gong Xinzi is rightly very suspicious of this tea, is it poison? Yang Guo, drink it first, and then he's making sure that it's all poured from the same pot and all that sort of thing, and and they drinks it, and then this is when it's revealed that the reason why the disciples of Passionless Valley can't eat meat is because that will totally invalidate the kung fu that protects their acupoints. And I don't know if you ever watched Scott Pilgrim.
I have not seen Scott Pilgrim.
Because there is one scene where one of the the rough plot is that Scott Pilgrim has to face off against the ex-boyfriends of his current love interest, and one of them is like a level, I don't know, level 7 vegan or whatever, and he has these superpowers. He can shoot beams, and it's basically immune to damage. He's super strong, and and this is only because he's a vegan, and the main character basically tricks him into drinking some milk, which is very reminiscent of this scene I was thinking there. And he starts losing all these superpowers because no, I've had milk. I'm no longer a vegan.
That's it. Well, that does sound like what happens here. Maybe they read Return of Condor Heroes, but a lot of people will find Return of Condor Heroes in Western media and wonder this. But I think and then what happens is he's sort of this massive, massively important kung fu of his is completely gone, and she pretty much gloats and says, "I've always told you, like, it's too easy to nullify this kung fu. There's no point in learning it." And then she blinds him with a she doesn't blind him completely. I think she gouges out one of his eyes with one of those date seeds, and he ends up running away. And then so just as the master of Passionless Valley is removed, this horrible, awful woman sort of settles in and takes over, and it's like 10 times worse than it was before. And so she just right away is like, okay, well, it's a wedding, Lua and Yango, you two need to get married, and so there's a whole thing where she's trying to force them to marry.
And we need to mention that at the beginning of this sort of scene where they make it to the wedding hall, the first thing Yangor does is feed the antidote, the one antidote pill that he has for the poison to Xiaolong Nu without telling her what it was.
Oh, that's right. Yep, and that is important. And then a couple of other things that might be worth mentioning too is that there is a lot of stuff going on with Jin Lun and some of the other guys where Jin Lun is kind of constantly egging on the Passionless Valley Master because he thinks that if he can get the three of them to fight, they'll all destroy each other. And he also wants some opportunities to see Jade Maiden swordplay again so he can look for weaknesses. And he's being just kind of like a real jerk to Yangor the whole time, but doing it in very sort of surreptitiously. And Man Guangzhu, the 8-foot-tall guy, is one of the few who's like really standing up for Yangor the entire time, and he really wins you over by the end of these chapters. You really start to like him.
He's basically like the sort of straightforward, honest guy who says what's on his heart, and if he likes you, he likes you. If he hates you, he hates you. Type of
yeah. And so then what ends up happening though is Lua eventually convinces her mother, partly because she's blocking the path of the date stone, to not kill Yangor, and instead she decides to use him to help her get revenge against the Gua couple. So she gives Yangor half of the pill and says he'll get the other half when he kills Gua Jing and Huang Rong. And the funny thing,
but for whatever reason, half of the pill actually speeds up the incubation period of the poison, so it halves it down to 16 days instead of like 36 days.
Every once in a while, you wonder how much of this he's making up as he goes along. Yeah, and it's one of the beautiful things about this genre, though, is the ability to sort of add in or take away these kind of details and do clever little things like this, so that suddenly there's like a new problem that they have to deal with. But yeah, so now he's only got 18 days to live instead of 36. And and so he and Xiaolong Nu and his posse of mercenaries and Jin Lun depart. And as they leave the valley, they just get into all kinds of conflict with each other. There's like a big fight between a bunch of them, and they all start fighting Jin Lun, and then Kublai Khan shows up and lays out a rug and starts talking with them. And did you want to say something? It sounded like you were.
I was thinking they just casually stroll the everyone have some wine. Stop fighting.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's funny in these books, people just kind of sort of bump into each other very coincidentally. I mean, he was looking for them because they did just kind of flee from his camp to chase after Zhu Batong. So in a way, he's kind of reminding you of this thing that had just happened before they went to Passionless Valley, but they do just kind of happen to bump into him, and at this point he explains that he's attacking Shangyang, and that he needs to get rid of Goa Jing, and Yang Guo is like, well, what a coincidence. I too am going to kill Goa Jing, so I'll do it. I just want you to promise me that you won't you won't name me like the top fighter of Mongolia or something. I forget the exact title, but there's
I think he tries to like pass it on to either to Jinlong and the other three, sort of like they can. Yeah, he didn't want credit for it because the only reason he's killing Guo Jing is not because he wants to assist the Mongols, it's because he wants to take revenge for his father's death, basically.
well, and also he realized that Jin Lun and the rest of them are going to just like be after him if he gets that title, so he doesn't want to. He doesn't want to. These guys are like the least functional adventuring group because their egos just keep tripping over each other. So, but then we get to Zhang Yong, and there's this great scene where they see Guo Jing fighting the Mongols at the walls of the city, and he's dressed in gray, and his men are dressed in blue and black, and he's just kicking butt, and he ends up meeting an old friend who he took as a prisoner in the battle, and he's merciful and sends him back. He says you can go, and then when the guy returns to Kublai's camp, Kublai just executes him, and
For good reason. Like he was like so the prisoner knew Guo Jing from his Mongol days as the Golden Blade consort. When he was slated to marry Genghis Khan's daughter or whatever, right?
Yeah. And he does compensate the family. He does compensate them for his bravery. So he's kind of taken with one hand and given with the other, but.
Yeah, you can't ruin your army's morale because one of the prisoners was like praising the enemy to no end, and it makes sense from a military point of view.
And morale is low, and he does end up retreating 40 li because he needs to regroup, and so Guo Jing goes in, and number one he discovers that Huang Rong is giving birth like at this moment, and he sleeps in the same room that night, and I think Zhao Long Nu is with him, right? The both of them go to Zhangyang, and they're let in, and Yang Guo is given quarters with Guo Jing, and they're going to sleep in the same bed, and he's going to kill him while he sleeps, and he keeps having doubts, and during this time he's asking Guo Jing about his father, and his father's like, look, it's very complicated, it's hard to, and we have to remember Guo Jing is not the smartest guy in the world, so he's just not good at sort of, he's not good at being evasive, and so I think it's just deepening Yang Guo's suspicions.
Rather than him acting sketchy or suspicious or whatever, it's just him not really knowing how to get the words across without being too casual. Your father was an evil bastard.
Yeah.
I think he was trying to think of what the best way to tell him was. It's like, okay, you know what? Let's just leave it for after the battle. Well, I'll tell you later. And Yang Guo sort of, for whatever reason, despite the fact that he should know Guo Jing quite well, he seems to think that Guo Jing is more shrewd than he is.
He thinks because he's like, oh, that villainous schemer Guo Jing, because he's really he's giving him a lot of credit.
On it. Yeah. It's funny because Yang Guo is supposed to be he hates all these customs and ingrained mindsets that everybody seems to have about him and his master, but on another level, he himself also has all those sorts of preconceptions that he can't get rid of. Once he sort of thinks about the fact that Guo Jing could be his father's killer, he one-track minds himself, all the evidence that he can. If there's 99 things saying that he wasn't, but the one thing that's saying that he was, he latches onto that one thing and tries to, and uses everything he can to justify why that one thing is true.
Well, I think part of it too is there's still a degree of self-pity in Yang Guo at this point, and he attributes a lot of the stuff that's happened to him to the Guo couple. And so I think it's an easy thing for him to imagine is true. It sort of explains his experience on Peach Blossom Island. He, instead of having to contend with his father's evil deeds and wondering if maybe he has demons of his own, he can sort of push everything onto Guo Jing and Huang Rong.
He is 16, so it makes perfect sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a totally. I mean, anybody who's met somebody that age, it's easy to forget because he's such a powerful martial hero at this point. But he is still quite young. Though granted, it's Song Dynasty China, where people probably came of age much earlier. But
I don't think that really changes when hormones start acting up. And it's not really one of those like, oh, I hate you, Dad, run up to your bedroom, slam the door type things. But it's about as close as you can
But you
get,
have to
I'd
wonder,
say.
when the Mongols are like ravaging the countryside, can you really pull a "I hate you, Dad" and run up to the?
That's true.
That's another important detail. On the way to the city, Yangor sees all the evidence of the Mongols advancing through, and like at one point earlier in the story, he saw a group of Mongol horsemen, and one of them had a baby on the end of a long spear.
Oh, that was like it when he was running away from Nemo Cho with Liu Wushang. He sees a baby sort of struggling to live at the end of a Mongol spear.
And so he's getting these constant, bits of evidence that he maybe should be doing something about the Mongol invasion. But he's sort of, again, I think this is part of Yangor thinking more about Yangor and not thinking about the world. And I think a lot of the novel is sort of the balance between his desire to sort of be unorthodox and marry his Shifu and devote himself to the love of his life, but also to be a hero and use his kung fu purposefully. And so, this is a crucial moment in the story where he's about to really decide, which way he's going to go. And by the end of the chapter, even though he has a lot of doubts, his resolve is strengthened after he has one of these conversations with Guo Jing, and it looks like he's gonna do the deed. But we can talk about that when we get to the next 5 chapters. But yeah. So did I leave anything out there? Was that all of it, or was that?
I think we went through quite a bit. I mean, there's a lot of detail in every chapter, so we can't go through everything. Otherwise, it'd just be dictating it. We may as well just start like
reading the novel.
An audio book of.
And also, I should say, I'm not 100% sure which edition we are reading, because we're just reading an online fan translation. And there was a revision, I think, in the 70s and a revision in the early 2000s. And so it's possible some of the details might not match other versions that are out there if people are reading it themselves. Like we said before, we're reading the version translated by Noodles.
I think one thing we actually glossed over was when Yang Guo first meets Jinlun, and while Jinlun is wounded, Yang Guo spends a bit of time contemplating about his martial arts and his love life as well, I guess, at that point. And it is a bit upset at himself, I think, for spreading his affection, among all these other ladies who aren't who he's in love with.
I think number one, he realizes that both in martial arts and in love, he's been what would be the word? He's been spreading himself around a lot. Do you know what I mean? He's dabbled in a lot of different styles, but never really focused on one. And I get in traditional martial arts, the idea is you focus on a particular style. And he hasn't cheated on Zhao Longnu, but he's definitely spent a lot of time with a number of different women, and he's been flirting with them heavily. And so
all of whom aren't much less attractive than Zhao Longnu.
Yeah, because he's very specific about that.
And he calls Liu Wushang little wifey as well. Like, that's his nickname for her.
Yeah. She calls him stupid egg, right? And he calls her wifey. And,
wifey.
And I mean, I think it's meant as a bit of a joke, but it still is like, if I don't think she's treating it as the joke he's treating it as, and pretty much every woman he's meeting is falling in love with him, and so
that's just typical wuxia protagonist syndrome, I think.
Yeah, I think. I mean, everybody except Li Mochu. Li Mochu is not in love, but even she said he was handsome. So I mean, he's Yeah, there's definitely
she's got issues of her own, so I wouldn't count her in there.
But yeah, it's definitely a very common thing. And again, unless you're in a Gulong novel where everybody might hate you, it's the protagonists do tend to be they tend to have a lot of troubles with women that many aspiring novelists would probably love to have. So you do wonder how much
that projection on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know his story, but but I mean, you see it in Heaven Sword Dragon Saber too. Like that's the whole thing in that story is he's kind of deciding who does he want to be with, and he has a number of women to choose from, and he sort of.
But the thing is, like, it's weird because so in this period, it's still perfectly normal for as a man to have wives and concubines. So I, I don't know. It's nice that the main characters are trying to sort of focus on one person to be the full recipient of their love, as it were. But it's at the same time, it sort of doesn't make sense from a period point of view in that, well, in that case, why can't you just marry them all as wives and have Shalom as number one, and then
Oh, I get what you're saying.
whoever as number two or three.
I mean, good luck with that, I suppose. If it's
Yeah. I mean, I know that it's not necessarily feasible, but it's a solution that never seems to come to mind to any of the protagonists
well,
suffering from.
in Legend of Condor Heroes, one of the characters is a consort. She's not the wife of the Jin Prince. She's his consort.
Yeah.
So I mean, stuff like that. I think I think, but I think a lot of the stuff is there's obviously anachronistic stuff that gets, the way that I sort of view the way the wuxia genre tends to be handled in these books is it's a little bit like the way we deal with like the Middle Ages in our old timey movies. It's a backdrop, but they freely sort of add in whatever they need if there's to fill. I mean, he does make a lot of really good use of history. A lot of this stuff is drawn very directly from history. But the thing that makes it so fun is it's not sterile and dull because of that. There's still sort of like enough modern sensibilities to make everything kind of click for the reader.
You say that, but then there's Duke of Mount Deer, and he's got 7 wives. I think the main character has at the end of the story.
But again, in this story is sort of like a love story. So I think if Xiaolong Nu was just a concubine or the first wife,
it wouldn't be as much of an impactful story. It's like if Romeo and Juliet, had Romeo could marry as many women as he could, or as he wanted, or whatever, or had other concubines. It would lessen the impact of the love, I'd say.
But I don't know. But I do think there is something to the idea of sort of there's this combination of straight history and playful modern sensibility mixing together, and that's kind of what makes it fun. Not necessarily. I mean, we probably have a long conversation about the about the concubine thing, but I think in general I kind of get that feel from books like this that it's just. The history isn't an oppressive, and I don't mean it like in the sense of you're oppressing me, oppressive. I mean it's not oppressive in that it's not this overwhelming thing in the story that shoves out all of the interesting and fun bits of the story. And so even like characters like Kublai Khan and Genghis Khan, who are stately historical figures, they feel real, They're
drawn into a tent of double tongue trying to crap on the floor, basically.
It makes it everybody feels kind of believable. And so I don't know, what are your thoughts so far? We're midway through, so we only have 2 books left. And
I think if this was sort of published volume by volume, or ending the volume 2, this is like a massive cliffhanger to be ending the volume on, because at this point, Yang was just like steeled his resolve to stab or to murder Guo Jing in his sleep. And you're not really quite sure what's about to happen. Will he, won't he? And I think it's shaping up quite well, sort of like a sort of mystery, and the tension is quite high at the moment. And we're still like in the process of discovery of trying to find out what actually happened, because we know Guo Jing's character, even if you haven't read the previous book. Enough has been said about his honesty and integrity in Return of Condor Heroes already that that we know that there's more to the story than meets the eye. And Yang Guo only has a testimony of Shabu, who's not, whose wits are a bit addled anyway. So it's I think we've sort of reached the peak of the tension for the revenge, the father's revenge plot line at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's I think this is a great run of chapters. Like every chapter through I think this volume, you kind of want to jump right to the next one and find out what's going to happen. And even if you know the story, that's the cool thing about this. You just keep it just kind of you it really. I think this is maybe one of the reasons why it is made into so many TV shows. It holds up well on repeat exposure, and so it's a I don't know I think this is a great book for people to check out. It's easily available online, and again we're midway through, and we're gonna continue on next week with the next 5 chapters, and then we'll and hopefully at the end of this we'll have 4 what was it 4 how many a number of hour-long podcasts that give you a breakdown of the overall story. It'll probably be what 6 or 7.
We've got 4 more to go because there's 2 more books, and we're doing 5 chapters each. Then so yeah.
Okay.
I think it's 40. I think it's 40 chapters for the whole series.
Yeah, it's 40 chapters, and I think we did the first 10 in one go, and then we broke it into 5 at a time.
And have you started the this TV series review with Adam yet?
No. We have one more season of Babylon 5, and then we're gonna do that. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, I think by the time we finish the book podcast, it'll probably be just in time for. No, well, we've got another month of book discussions to go, and then I don't know, maybe a month isn't quite enough time to finish Babylon.
No, we could probably do it in a month. We've been getting pretty good at Babylon because we do at one point we were doing 5 episodes a week.
Yeah.
So I think we can do it.
So if it coincides, then yeah, anyone who's listening, you can also start listen to their discussion on the TV series.
Yeah, which is a whole other thing, and it's interesting, and that's usually I think what gets people interested in these is the TV series, at least people in the West, because it's probably going to be your first exposure to that or a movie, and so we're going to do the 2006 one, and it's got the actress who's hired to play Mulan in the live action Disney movie. So it'll be somewhat relevant to something going on, but yeah, I think that's a good sort of version to do. I was gonna do the one from the 80s, which is also good, but it's really old, and I didn't want Adam to have to endure a really old television show that had a story he had no experience with. So I decided to go with the newer version. But yeah, so we'll be back on next week, and again, this is Return of Condor Heroes. We're doing the Noodles translation, and this is something that you can find online fairly easily. And we look forward to being back on and continuing the discussion.